All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, or to the right of the video if you're on a larger screen like a computer. So we'll start here with Dan F. Says, "Hey there, Quentin. I need some swing training specifically for my irons. I had amazing results with the 20-minute distance fix, but only for my driver swing. I honestly hit my driver 25 yards farther than my friends, but I am more than a club shorter than all of them with my irons. A big difference. Hoping you can give me a general plan of action. Should I do the ball striking masterclass? Maybe buy that brick. Without seeing your swing and really knowing the reason why, typically, it's probably not club head speed related, because typically when you gain speed with your driver, you're going to get a trickle down effect with your irons, right? So obviously you're not swinging your irons as fast, typically, and not as aggressively either. But a lot of times you will get distance gains with your irons without really even working on distance gains with your irons. Now, there could be all kinds of reasons why you're not hitting your irons as far as your friend, but your driver farther. It could be that you're mishitting the ball, so not hitting the ball in the middle of the face. The ball striking masterclass would be a great course, because that's going to help you to get your face angle lined up with your club path, getting your strike in the right place, getting your ground contact in the right place. I think that would be a good thing to do. The brick is certainly a good thing if you're coming over the top and cutting across the ball. That can certainly help. It could be shaft lean. You're not, maybe you don't have much shaft lean at all, or little or no shaft lean, right? Or maybe you have backward shaft lean. That could be a big part of it. So if that's the case, then maybe if your friends have a little bit more shaft lean, then they can be hitting their irons farther than you, because they're essentially de-lofting the club. So working through the toss speed golf system. So really, the only general plan of action would be toss speed golf system. The ball striking masterclass, I think, would be good. And the brick, doing drills with the brick would certainly be good too. I think those are all good ideas. But they're more, if you're looking for more of a personalized plan to get you on track the quickest, I would recommend signing up for like online lessons and doing something like that. Because if you work with an instructor, we're going to be able to look at your swing. We're going to be able to see, oh yeah, okay, this is what's going on. This is why, lack of distance with your irons. This is what's going on. Or we would at least do some testing to kind of figure out and see what the reason is. But usually it's fairly evident pretty quickly. So I would recommend the online lessons if you're looking for the quickest and fastest solution. But the ball striking masterclass is good. I'd sign up for that the next time that we offer it. Working through the toss speed golf system, possibly the 20-minute shallowing fix is also another one. If you're coming down steep with an open face, you're going to cut across it. You're just not going to hit your irons as far. And also, it's a big reason why a lot of people don't have shaft lean, is because the face is open when they're coming down, and then they come down steep because of that. So the 20-minute shallowing fix can help you to get that club face more closed, get that club swinging more from the inside, and also help you to do the things that are necessary to get more shaft lean as well. So 20-minute, I would say probably one of the things that you can do right away is the 20-minute shallowing fix. I'd definitely look at that. That's probably going to be because that's a fairly quick thing to work through. Now, to make it second nature, you would want to kind of continue to work through it, but you can get results pretty quickly with that. The toss speed golf system is more of a slow burn thing. If it's shaft lean that is the problem, that's not something that you're going to be able to fix like that. That's something that takes time. That's basically, it's working through the whole toss speed golf system to get that worked out. The ball striking masterclass is a skill-based course. It's not necessarily going to fix your shaft lean if you have shaft lean issues or anything like that, but it will help you take the swing that you currently have and help you be able to hit the ball more in the middle of the face more often, hit the ground in the right spot more often, have your face and your path lined up better. So that would be a good course. But like I said, the best thing that you could probably do is do the online lessons, so that way we can assess and see what's going on. So if you're interested in that, I don't think I have any spots available right now. But above the video here, you should see a link where you can either sign up for the waiting list or sign up for the online lessons or claim a spot. So I'd recommend doing that if you're interested in the fastest way possible to get that diagnosed and worked out. All right, so let's keep going here. T. Carruthers, says last week Michael Durr published a video on how to start the downswing by dropping the hand straight down and bowing the lead wrist to begin the swing. This was done with an iron. How does this apply to a driver and a fairway wood? It would just apply the same. It's not so. You still want the same things to happen at impact, right? You want to shallow out the club. You want to square up the face. You want to hit the ball in the middle of the face. Now, the only thing that you don't really have to do with the driver is hit the ground in the right spot. You have more margin for error there. You can actually hit a little bit down on it or a little bit up on it and, still hit great drives, right? You can have some margin for error there. But where you have like a smaller margin for error because it's less loft, you're hitting the ball farther, is where you're hitting the ball in the face and your face and path relationship. So really what bowing the wrist is doing, and keep in mind, folks, you absolutely do not have to bow the wrist. I can't emphasize that enough. It's a very difficult thing to do in the golf swing. And there are a lot of high-level players that do it, but it's just not an easy thing to do. And keep in mind, the high-level players that do it, they have a lot of club head speed. And generally, I don't recommend most recreational golfers do it because it's a less powerful way to swing the golf club when you bow the wrist for most people. So think about this. If I clench my fist as hard as I possibly can, right, it's hard to move my wrist, right? If I start bowing my wrist, I can't really keep that pressure in my fist that well, right? I can keep the most amount of pressure in my fist by having a fairly neutral wrist, right? So how does that relate to club head speed? Well, the club head speed is really directly related to how much force you can put into the handle. So if I can't put as much force into the handle with my wrist like this, then I'm basically lowering the amount of club head speed, right? Now, why do tour players bow the wrist? Well, the reason is that it's kind of a two birds with one stone kind of situation, right? Bowing the wrist does two things that are great to have in the golf swing. One, it closes the club face, right? So you see there, if I bow my wrist, it closes the club face. It also shallows the club a little bit. So if I can shallow out the club and get the face more square or closed with one move, that's great. But there's pros and cons, right? And like I was saying, a lot of these great players have the bow in the wrist, and they have a lot of club head speed. So if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of club head speed and you're wanting more club head speed, then I really don't recommend bowing the wrist, because likely you're not going to be able to swing the club with as much speed if you do. Excuse me. So there's other ways to shallow out the club. There's lots of ways to shallow out the club. There's lots of levers you can pull to kind of shallow out the club. And there are also better ways to square up the face. And that's just by having a stronger grip, right? It just makes it a lot simpler and easier. So keep in mind, you don't have to do these things in the golf swing, bowing the wrist and things like that. Bowing may have been a bad word, more like turning the wrist down to square the club. I mean, that's bowing the wrist. So yeah, that's really what's going on there. So like I said, I don't necessarily recommend most recreational golfers do that. That's part of the reason why we don't have the move anymore, because that's essentially what the move was. And really Clay thought it through, and really there's a better way. Now if you're getting great results from bowing the wrist and doing all that, and you're happy with the amount of speed and distance and everything that you have, then by all means. But it's not really any different doing it with an iron than doing it with a driver. It's really you do the amount that you need to get the face square. Now, typically, a lot of times with a driver, you will do it less because the ball is more forward in the stance typically, which means the club head is going to tend to be more closed by the time it gets to it, right? So that's really what it comes down to. So hopefully that makes sense. But But yeah, it's not really going to be any different. You're just making the same swing. The only difference is that it's with a driver, and you're not hitting the ground. You're hitting the ball more forward in the stance, so the face can't be as close. Because if you think about it this way, right? For an iron swing, I'm coming in, I'm contacting the ball there. So if I imagine where I'm hitting a driver, if I make the same swing, I'm contacting it there. So let's say that at impact, I have a dead square face and a dead neutral path, meaning that my club is basically turning the corner. It's working into out, into out, into out. Then as soon as I get to the ball, it's turning the corner, so it's neutral. And then right after I hit the ball, my club starts to work to the left, right? So let's say I'm doing that with an iron, right? I'm contacting the ball right there. Well, if I use that exact same swing for a driver, right? And again, it would be more out here. And then my path would be working to the left a little bit, and my face would be more to the left. So if I made the exact same swing, but just swung it with a driver, right? So obviously my swing would be a little bit flatter because, or a little bit, my swing plane would be a little bit flatter because of that. If I did that, then my face and path would be a little bit more left. So with the driver, really the only difference in the swing is that I'm not, because the ball position is more forward, I'm hitting it later in the arc, is that my path is going to be, I'm going to try to feel like my swing direction is more to the right a little bit, and that my club face is less closed, because if it's the same amount as with my iron, then by the time I get to the ball, it's going to be too close. I might hook it. So that's really the only difference. So it might be a little less bowed. You might be a little more shallowing, right, to do it with the driver, but it's really not that much different. All right, keep the questions coming. We got plenty of time here. While you guys are coming up with questions, I'm just going to be answering some emails and stuff. So no worries if you don't have any questions. All right, so we got a question here from Kurt. All right, so Kurt says, divot board, my pattern is a short mark to the left of the ball, and I am a right-handed golfer. However, the divot is curving downward toward the left after I pass the mark where the ball should be. What drill within the Top Speed Golf system would be best to straighten out my swing? 20-minute shallowing fix. That'd be the 20-minute shallowing fix. If your divot is going to the left, that means that you are coming down steep. You think about it. I got my divot board right here. Right. So if I have this sitting right here, right, if I swing like this to the left, right, see the kind of divot that it creates? Right? It creates a leftward divot. If I swing a lot from the inside, right, see it creates a rightward divot. And if I swing nice and shallow and on plane, you can see how that's going to create a pretty straight divot, right? So the 20-minute shallowing fix would be where you'd want to go to get the club more shallowed out. So to get to that course, all you have to do is click the instruction tab at the top of the screen. And then from the drop-down menu there, you can select the 20-minute shallowing fix. And those would be the drills that I would recommend that you work through to get that worked out. A good particular drill as well is with the blue brick. If you're someone that struggles with coming down steep, the blue brick is by far the best tool out there. Now, the blue brick didn't exist when Clay made the 20-minute shallowing fix, so you won't see it in there. But in the 20-minute shallowing fix, Clay uses an impact bag. And you could replace that with the blue brick. So if you're having trouble getting your divot to point to the right, then I would highly recommend getting a blue brick and doing the shallowing drill. And here's the reason why it's the best shallowing drill. There's lots of drills you can do with this. It's not just shallowing, but we'll just talk about the shallowing here. So if I take this alignment sticks that comes with the blue brick and I put it in the wedge slot here, that creates this angle here, right? And this is the angle that I want to be swinging on. So if I come in here and I swing underneath this, my divot is either going to be to the right or it's going to be pretty straight, right? If I were to swing in a way that would make me hit this stick, then that would make my path kind of go to the left. So I like this for lots of reasons. One is that we're getting a good visual representation of how the club wants to come down. So I can actually have a nice checkpoint here. When I get the lead arm parallel, I want my club to either be a little bit shallower to this stick or parallel to it. If it's like this, if it's steeper than the stick, it's going to be very, very difficult to shallow out the club without standing up out of the swing, right? Because that's what most people do. They'll be like this and then they'll stand up out of it. So we want to get it to where it's at least shallower to it or parallel to it, and then we can keep turning through to get that club to work down in a good spot. And that's going to allow me to get my divot to be more straight or a little bit into out. So that's basically what I would recommend, that you do. It's really the best drill for the job. So if you're interested in a blue brick, you can get one. All you have to do is go to the resources tab. That takes you to the page with all the stuff that we recommend, training aids and stuff like that. You'll find a link to the blue brick on there. We do go in and out of stock because we tend to sell them out whenever we get new ones in. So hopefully we have some in stock. I don't know what the stock is like on the blue brick right now. I think we have some, but if we don't, I think there should be like a waiting list you can get on. They'll let you know when we get more in stock. When there are more in stock, and then you can pick one up at that time. All right, keep the questions coming here. All right, keep the questions coming. We got about 35 minutes left. If we have any more questions, if not, no worries. If you're just hopping on the office hours, I'm just waiting for a question to be asked. We got about 30 minutes left here. I'll stay on here right up until 6 o'clock Eastern time. So if you got questions, now's a good time to ask. If not, no big deal. Like I said, I'm just answering emails and stuff. But I will stay on here till 6 o'clock if anybody has any more questions. So as I mentioned before, if you're just jumping on the office hours, we got about 25 minutes left here. If you got your questions, feel free to ask. If not, no worries. All right, we got about 20 minutes left if we have any more questions. If not, no big deal. Like I said, I'll stay on here till 6, but I'm out of emails to answer. So now, now I'm just kind of twiddling my thumbs. All right, so we got a question here from Greg. He says, "Hey Q, relative to the path on the downswing, my videos show my hands slightly above the takeaway line. The takeaway line. I'm not familiar with that, but the club head eventually ends up below the line, about halfway down through impact. Is that okay, or should I work more on getting my hands below the takeaway line on the downswing?" Thank you. Again, I'm not familiar with what the takeaway line is. I don't know what. I'm not sure what that is. But as long as the club is coming down to the ball, and your path to the ball is good, and it's fine. The line at setup from the club head through my body. You're talking about like the shallowing line, the line that goes from the ball through the middle of your elbow. I assume that's what you're talking about. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's fine as long as it's getting under it at some time. You're good, right? So basically, if you imagine you're doing like the blue brick shallowing drill, as long as we're getting under that and not too much under it, because obviously you can overdo it, right? But as long as I'm getting underneath this and not too much underneath it, and typically you'll know if you're getting too much underneath it because you'll more than likely have a hard time. You'll start thinning shots and chunking shots because when we swing too much from the inside, now it's not. When you swing too much from the inside, your club will tend to hit the ground sooner. But you may also need to make sure that you're getting good weight shift to your lead side. You're getting forward enough to get your low point in the right spot. So when you look at the best players, if you draw that shallowing line, which is basically represented by this stick, typically at lead arm parallel. So I kind of go through what I look for as it relates to the shallowing line from a pro perspective, right? So these are like the best players in the world. The overwhelming majority of them are fitting this. There are some that may not quite get exactly this, but the overwhelming majority of them do. So if we imagine this is the shallowing line that goes from the ball up to the middle of my elbow here, right? You see how that pretty much matches that. If we extend this all the way up, right? When you look at the best players, what you're going to see from the top of the swing to lead arm parallel is you're going to see the hands work toward that shallowing line, right? Some players will get on it. Some players will just work toward it. The important thing is that it's just working toward it. Because if you have a more upright swing, you're probably not going to get the hands right on the shallowing line at that lead arm parallel position. If you have a flatter swing, if you're not super upright, then typically you'll have your hands on that shallowing line at that point in the swing. Now, at that point in the swing, what I like to see with the shaft is I like to see the shaft either parallel to or a little bit shallower to that line, right? So that's at that position there. When we get to waist level here, belt level with the hands, I want to see those hands basically get on that shallowing line at that point, and I got to see that club a little bit shallower to it, right? So that's like ideally where you'd want to be. Then when we get the club parallel, we would want to see that club either a little bit inside the hands or in line with the hands at this point in the swing. And with the hands either on that shallowing line or maybe a hair below it. And then when we get to impact, we want to see those hands start to work a little bit below that shallowing line because your hands should be working kind of around the corner and to the left if you have shaft lean, right? So if my hands are forward, my hands should actually be working to the left a little bit from here to impact because my club's going to work down and to the right while my hands work up and to the left a little bit, right? So that's essentially what is ideal. Now there are some tour players. I'm trying to think of anybody off the top of my head. Phil would be one that I know. Phil Mickelson would be the one that I know right away off the top of my head of like a marquee player that doesn't quite have the club shallow like I'm talking about that early in the swing. He's a little bit steeper to that shallowing line, but when he gets here, he's in a good spot. This is the closer we are to the golf ball, the more important the positions are, right? So if your club head's outside your hands here, right, then we need to get that to where it's more in there. So that way your club path is more neutralized, right? Because if it's there in order to kind of neutralize it, you're going to have to kind of stand up out of it and push your hands out that way. That's going to tend to want to open up the face. It's going to tend to slow you down, right? So what we also want to have a little slingshot effect where that club head is shallow to my hand path, right? And I'm able to get my hand path working up and to the left, and I can slingshot that club down to the right. That's going to allow me to have good control of it. It's also going to allow me to have some good speed and use all the forces correctly on the club, right? But if I get it outside of that, in order to be able to hit a functional shot, most likely you're going to have the forces acting all weird on the club, and that's going to tend to lead to mishits and things like that. So yeah, that would be kind of what I'd be working through. As long as you're here, you're really good. If you want to get to like a pro level, if you're steep to here, obviously, there are players that play at a high level, but Phil's a good example of that because he's probably one of the most, if not the most skilled golfers of all time. Because from a mechanical standpoint, he doesn't have don't get me wrong. He has a great golf swing. He's doing the top speed golf system. He's doing all the major things in the golf swing that matter. He does shallow out the club. He just shallows it a little later than most of his peers do, right? But to make up for that, he makes up for that with skill. So there's a difference between technique and skill, right? Technique is how you move, and skill is your ability to control the way that you move, right? So, Phil's technique is an A+ technique as far as shallowing out the club is concerned, but he has A+ skill that kind of makes up for it, right? So, it's just about the ball doesn't really care, one way or the other. The club is coming into the ball the same way, right? It's just that it's a little bit easier to control if you have it a little bit shallower earlier. That's why you see a lot of the best players doing it that way. So I think the best drill you can really do would be with the blue brick here. Set this up, right? I'll go to the top. I come down here and pause, and I try to think, okay, if I can get my hands underneath there, then I'm good, right? That means that my hands aren't moving out too much. And then I want to make sure that my club is either parallel to or to shallower to it. And then if you're someone who's struggling, you're like this right here, it wouldn't be a bad idea to feel like I'm going to feel super exaggerated right here, right? I'm going to feel like I'm more like this. This is more shallow than what you would really want to be, right? So that way I can take that feel to my swing and apply it, hopefully, and then your feel will get you more to where you actually want to be, right? So that's kind of how I would work through it. No problem, Greg. Glad to help. Thanks for the correction on the shrimp shallowing line. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page because I wasn't familiar with the takeaway line or that you were talking about. Very helpful with clarifications as to where the hand should be relative to the club face. Awesome, no problem. Yeah, sorry, I just didn't know what the in your defense, we've called it many different things. We've called it the elbow plane line. Think they might have called it the consistency line. We had a cone at one point. So, I just call it the shallowing line. Try to call it that because that's how I use it. I use it to make sure that my students are shallowing out the club, or when I'm looking at tour player swings or whatever, I draw it on there to kind of see how they're interacting with it. That's how I know that, is I've just looked at so many swings of high level players, and that's what I notice, how the hands and the club interact to that line is basically what I discussed there. So that's what I'm seeing in pretty much every single player. Like I said, there are some exceptions to the rule, right? Like Phil Mickelson. I'm sure there's a few more, but most overwhelming majority of players are going to have, by that lead arm parallel position, they're going to have that club in a either parallel to or shallower to that line position, because it's just difficult to get the club to work down to the ball in the correct way. If you don't, typically you're going to have to kind of push your hands out to do that. And that's what Phil does. Phil kind of pulls down and then he kind of pushes his hands out, and then then gets it to go through. But obviously, he's really good at doing that, gets him in the right spot. So works for him. If I could play the way he does, I wouldn't change it either. I wouldn't be worried about changing it too much. That's why you have to be careful a little bit. If you do things at a high level, you got to be careful of kind of changing your swing, because you could just be making things harder for yourself. I think Ricky Fowler is kind of learning that, right? He had kind of that laid off kind of swing, and then he would actually kind of steepen it, but he would still be shallow, right? To make that make sense. So if you imagine if I still had that line there, he would be like this at the top, and he would actually steepen the club. But when he got to that lead arm parallel position, he would have the club in the right spot, and then he would just keep it there all the way down. The guy got top five in all the majors in a season doing that. I think he's the only guy to ever do that, right? Get top five in all the majors in one season. And then after that year, because he felt like that's what was holding him back, he worked to get his club in a different spot so it would shallow like a lot of his friends do. But obviously he almost lost his card, essentially doing that. So now he's since come back. He's gotten back on track and come back. I saw he withdrew this past weekend. I'm not sure what that was all about, but I didn't look at the story or anything. I just saw that he withdrew. But yeah, it's John Rahm does the same thing. John Rahm shallows at the clip. Daniel Berger, who placed, got a top 10. It looked like this weekend. He has it really laid off and then steepens it. So that is a way to do it. It's an interesting way, but there are high level players that do that. John Rahm does it that way, where they kind of have it laid off and then they actually steepen it to keep it shallow. But anyway, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks, everyone, for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you next time.